Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 24 quarterback and my top 24 tight end rankings for week number 3 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at notorious FNTSY. I would also like to ask that if you guys have any questions revolving around week 3 for fantasy football, to please make sure that you ask them down below in the comment section. I love talking to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 3 quarterback and tight end rankings. We begin with quarterbacks 1 through 8, headlined by Josh Allen, quarterback of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami on Sunday. Last week, Josh Allen went up against the Tennessee Titans, and he absolutely carved those motherfuckers up like they were the Thanksgiving turkey. 38 attempts, 26 completions, 317 passing yards, 1 rush for 10 yards, and 4 touchdowns, 30 fantasy points. Quarterback number 4 at the end of the week in week 1 up against the LA Rams to kick off the season. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 33 fantasy points. Quarterback number 2. Now, I understand that this matchup up against the Miami Dolphins defense may be a little bit tough, but with how many injuries the Buffalo Bills have on defense, I really do believe this game is going to be a high-scoring back-and-forth affair. Thus, Josh Allen could easily finish as the number 1 quarterback at the end of the week. Next up, we move to number 2, Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. Last week, up against the Chargers, 24 of 35 for 235 passing yards, 2 rushes for -1 yards, 2 touchdowns, 17 fantasy points, and he was the quarterback 13 at the end of the week. In week number 1, up against the Arizona Cardinals, that game was a slaughter by the Kansas City Chiefs. This man put up 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 35 fantasy points, and he was the number 1 quarterback at the end of the week. This week, up against the Colts, who absolutely looked atrocious up against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. I expect Patrick Mahomes to be able to easily put up a very high point total in this matchup, and honestly, he could also be the number 1 quarterback at the end of the week. These first couple of guys, the top 4, are the guys that I would consider in the range of finishing as the quarterback 1 at the end of the week. Obviously, could for instance, Kyler Murray-like guy finish as the number 1 quarterback? Of course. But those top 4 guys are extremely close in my rankings. At number 3, we have Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Washington Commanders in Washington. Last week, up against the Minnesota Vikings, Jalen Hurts had a field day on Monday Night Football. 333 passing yards, 11 rushes for 57 rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns, 1 interception, 34 fantasy points. Quarterback number 3 at the end of the week. This guy basically runs the ball 10 to 15 times every single game, which gives you such a big boost in fantasy football, because fantasy football now is so heavily catered towards the quarterbacks that can run the ball. Sure, could a guy like Tom Brady finish as the number 3 quarterback at the end of the year because of how much the Bucs throw? And imagine Evans, Godwin, all these guys are healthy? Definitely. But a guy like Jalen Hurts who can run out of the pocket, a guy that has so much rushing ability, he just gets a huge boost in my mind. Up against the Washington Commanders, this game has all the makings to be a tit-for-tat back-and-forth matchup, so I'm definitely a big fan of Jalen Hurts this week. At number 4, we have Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens going up against the New England Patriots in New England this week. Last week, this man put on a show up against the Miami Dolphins. 318 passing yards, 9 rushes for 119 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns, 43 fantasy points. He was the quarterback number 1 at the end of the week. This team, at the beginning of the game, took a shit directly on the chest of the Miami Dolphins. That continued up until about the 4th quarter, when the Miami Dolphins did a 360 and completely turned everything around. Now, Lamar Jackson put on the best quarterback performance ever in NFL history. According to ELO, he had the highest ELO ever of a quarterback that lost. This contract shit that's going on behind the scenes with Lamar Jackson is clearly motivating him to destroy these defenses. Lamar Jackson is on fucking fire, NBA Jam style, and I expect him to continue the heat up against the Patriots. On paper, the Patriots matchup will be difficult for Lamar Jackson, but I don't think it's difficult enough to rank him outside of the top 5. He is my quarterback number 4. Next up, we move to quarterback number 5, Mr. You Like That, Kirk Cousins of the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the Detroit Lions on Sunday at 1 p.m. Now, last week, we got the Kirk Cousins full experience of when this man plays on primetime. I am pretty sure, now don't hold me to this, that he is 2-10 against the spread on primetime games. Kirk Cousins at 1 p.m. is amazing. At least he looked amazing at week 1, and typically he plays pretty good during the day. But once it turns tonight, Kirk Cousins is past the motherfucker's bedtime. He wants to be sleepy. Sleepy Kirk Cousins ends up playing like shit. But guess what? This game's at week 1. Kirk Cousins is going to be up bright and early and bushy-tailed, and I believe that Kirk Cousins is going to go off up against the Detroit Lions. Another one of those matchups that I believe could be incredibly high-scoring in the Dome at home in Minnesota. Again, to reiterate, last week was a fucking disaster for Kirk Cousins. 27 of 46 for 221 passing yards, 2 rushes for 20 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 12 fantasy points, quarterback number 25. Kirk Cousins, you were better off having fucking Stevie Wonder roll out there and be the starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe he wouldn't have thrown the ball as much to Darius Slay. It was an embarrassment, but hey, I'm in for the bounce back narrative, especially with how loaded to the gills this Minnesota Vikings offense is around Kirk Cousins. Next up, we move to Matthew Stafford of the LA Rams going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. Now, everyone after that Buffalo Bills game, the first game to kick off the NFL season, everyone was shitting their pants on Matthew Stafford. They started to panic. There was so much worry because, oh, Matthew Stafford, that issue that he was dealing with in the offseason, maybe that's serious. Maybe Matthew Stafford lost it. Maybe just after the Super Bowl, magically he just declined and fell off the edge of the earth. Because in that game, 29 of 41, 240 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 11 fantasy points. But in week 2 up against Atlanta, he had 272 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The interceptions aren't the best, but we all know that Matthew Stafford's an interception machine. 21 fantasy points, quarterback 10 at the end of the week. Sure, the Atlanta Falcons defense is soft as baby shit, but the Arizona Cardinals defense isn't this heavily fortified thing that Matthew Stafford won't be able to penetrate. Matthew Stafford should be able to dice these motherfuckers up how Gordon Ramsay dices up some onions on Hell's Kitchen. I really do believe that Matthew Stafford is in for a solid spot here up against the Arizona Cardinals. Speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, quarterback number 7, the short king himself, the king of the war zone, Kyler Murray. Now, week number 2 up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas, things were not looking very good for Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray was struggling immensely. And my favorite part about Kyler Murray is when he runs the football, he looks like a child who just stole his mom's phone and is running away. If you just go right now, look up Kyler Murray running the ball. On that final drive, when they win the game, this motherfucker is running around like to Benny Hill music. And he's running. He runs like this. Like the ball is in his hand. He's going like this. And he's just running away like his mom is chasing him down, trying to get the phone back. But Kyler's just trying to go watch a Call of Duty montage. It is absolutely hilarious. Kyler has looked good through the first 2 games of the season. Again, week 2 to start things off, it was bad. Week 1 to start things off as well, it was kind of bad, but he does end up figuring things out towards the end of the game. I think this week up against the LA Rams, Kyler Murray has a decent enough performance to finish as a top 8 quarterback. At number 8, we got Justin Herbert, the pervert of the LA Chargers, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is an incredibly easy matchup for Justin Herbert, who finishes the quarterback 5 in week 1, quarterback 9 in week number 2. The issue is that Justin Herbert is dealing with some serious injuries. The spread on this game moved from Chargers -7 to Chargers -3 on Friday, yesterday. So Vegas is slightly worried about the fact that Justin Herbert might not play, and that people were getting a huge edge taking the Jaguars +7. The Jaguars look competitive. Justin Herbert, if he plays and he looks healthy enough to go, we'll know on Sunday, tomorrow, then I'm playing Justin Herbert with full confidence. But there is still some slight worries in my mind about the fact that he is banged up. And obviously, you don't want your starting quarterback that you're playing in fantasy to be banged up like that. But again, he is just so good that it might not even end up mattering. Now we move to quarterbacks 9 through 16, headlined by Joe Shiesty, quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the Jumbo Jets in MetLife this week. In week number 1, despite the struggles early on in the game and being an interception machine, Joe Burrow turned things around and finished as the quarterback 6 last week up against Dallas quarterback number 15. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals are 0-2. The Jets beat the Bengals last year with Mike White under center, but I think that magic is gone. I know the Jets are riding high. Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals are down in the dumps, but I really think they bounce back in a big way in this game and slap the ever-living shit out of that jumbo Jets defense. At number 10, we have Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. Last week, Derek Carr finishes as the quarterback number 11, 25 of 39, 252 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He was all right. The thing is that Raiders offense shut down in the second half. They were winning, and they were like, you know what? Let's just kind of crawl up into a little ball. Armadillo style. Is that armadillo that does that? I don't know. Actually, that was a bad... Maybe inside the shell like a turtle would be the better metaphor, maybe. I don't know. I'm not a English genius, so I don't even know what that word would be, Didn't do the best on the SATs. But hey, Derek Carr of the Las Vegas Raiders should be in for a solid matchup here. The Battle of the Basement, 0-2 versus 0-2. Derek Carr's a pretty reliable quarterback every single week. He has Devontae Adams. Hunter Renfrow is going to be out, so the grit is going to be a little bit low on the field, but I still do think that Derek Carr is able to get it done and finish as a top 12 quarterback. To mention real quick, the quarterbacks and the tight ends in today's video that already played on Thursday Night Football will not be mentioned. I wouldn't have had Jacoby Brissett or Kissin' Titties Mitchell Trubisky ranked inside of the quarterback parameters anyways, but people be like, Nick, where was David Njoku, or where was Pat Freiermuth when we get to them? They're not ranked because they already played, and there's no way you can just throw them into your lineup now. At number 11, we have Russell Wilson, Mr. Broncos Country. Let's ride. Russell Wilson. What happened, pal? What's happening, buddy? What's happening? Quarterback 14 week 1, quarterback 24 week 2, up against the Houston Texans, a defense that is awful. He should have been able to easily bend that defense over and fuck them relentlessly through the night. But instead, the Houston Texans are able to keep it close. Nathaniel Hackett, the head coach of this team, is going to get fired. Not just fired off of this team, he's going to get fired directly into the fucking sun by the Denver Broncos fans because of how embarrassing things have been for this team. I think Russell Wilson has a decent game, but I just don't feel as confident in him. The Niners defense is pretty difficult. At number 12, we have the revenge game of Carson Wentz going up against the Eagles. Carson Wentz has had back-to-back Michael Jordan 96, 97 weeks of finishing as a top 5 quarterback. I think this week he breaks that trend, but he still finishes inside of the top 12. This is a matchup that I love, but something that does really worry me about Carson Wentz this week is the revenge game narrative. The revenge game narratives over week 1 and week number 2 have not worked very well for the player getting the revenge, and instead the other team plays very well against them. For instance, week 1, Russell Wilson, the homecoming to Seattle, you're thinking, the Denver Broncos are going to beat the shit out of this team. The Seattle Seahawks aren't even going to be able, they're going to be walking with a limp after the game, right? But instead, Russell Wilson loses that game, doesn't play amazing. Carson Wentz, I think, is a good quarterback. Right now, he's playing good. He's got the weapons. Jahan Dotson's eating on low volume. Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson. They have Logan Thomas back as well. So this is a very solid offense. I like Carson Wentz a decent amount this week, but the revenge game narrative does scare me slightly. And I did move down 2 players that I kind of talked up a little bit, but I had to move them down. Quarterbacks 15 and 16 I previously had above guys like Jared Goff, Tua, Carson Wentz, but I had to move them down because, I don't know, man, I'm just getting really bad vibes about this game, especially with how many injuries the Bucs have. It might just be a game, and with the suspension of Mike Evans, it might just be a game that is heavily Leonard Fournette, but we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. Number 13, we got my guy, QB1 Uno, quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, going up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, if you're looking at narratives from the last couple of years, Tua Tagovailoa has been nothing short of awful against the Buffalo Bills. Against the Buffalo Bills, this guy can't do anything. But I have a feeling, a strong feeling, I've got a feeling, that Tua Tagovailoa is going to play good this week because there's no longer the Brian Flores team that, they got a good defense, but it seems like he didn't trust Tua. It seems like Mike McDaniel trusts Tua, and also, in the past, when they're playing the Buffalo Bills, Devontae Parker is the number 1 receiver. The number 2 receiver is like Mac fucking Hollins, right? Now we have Tyreek Hill and Jalen waddled away, waddle, waddle, till the very next day. Bum, 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 bum. Tua Tagovailoa has to have a good game here. He just pantsed the Baltimore Ravens and finished as the quarterback 2 at the end of the week. The first 2 quarters, things aren't looking great for Tua, right? He throws that awful interception to end the half. Then the third quarter, he starts looking decent. And then the fourth quarter, this man, I don't watch anime, but I think in Dragon Ball Z, when you go super crazy, you go super sane, Tua Tagovailoa went into full Super Saiyan mode. And he just played amazing. It was actually insane to see. This motherfucker threw 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter of the game. 36 completions, 50 attempts, 469 passing yards, 1 rush, 1 rushing yard, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 41 fantasy points, quarterback number 2. Now, again, I talked about this with Josh Allen. The Buffalo Bills defense is down astronomical. They are injured at a lot of spots. The cornerback 3 and 4 are going to be the guys that have to shadow, or not necessarily shadow, but they're going to have to cover Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Even the best corners in the league can't stop Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and now you're having to deal with the other guys, the outcasts. This is a bad news Bears scenario for the Buffalo Bills. I think Tua Tagovailoa takes over, but I am worried about the fact that even though the front is injured for the Buffalo Bills defense, that even with the injuries, the scheme might just be so strong there that even though they're only rushing 4, they're going to be able to get to Tua. Tua might struggle a bit, so that's why I don't have him ranked super highly. I love the matchup, but there is still panic for me. Jared Goff, quarterback of the Detroit Lions, quarterback number 14, 20 of 34 up against the Washington Commanders, 256 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, quarterback 8 at the end of the week. A huge round of applause for Jared Goff. Not many people believe in him, but he continues to play pretty strong. Week 1, he was quarterback number 18. He's definitely a serviceable quarterback every single week. He obviously doesn't have that crazy top 5 upside, but here up against the Minnesota Vikings again, this is one of those other matchups that I think could be Rock'em Sock'em Robots-esque, where it's 2 teams punching each other, not much defense. This game could be extremely exciting. We saw the Minnesota Vikings defense looked a little bit overrated from week number 1 to week number 2, so I think Jared Goff gets it done in a solid way. Amon-Ra St. Brown is chef's kiss, Week. The guy is unguardable. Can't guard Amon-Ra. That's can't guard Mike. That's Michael Thomas's Twitter handle. Can't guard Amon-Ra. The man's going absolutely crazy. This offense is loaded in Detroit. I like Jared Goff a bunch. Now, after Jared Goff is where things start to get incredibly dicey. This is where you start the quarterback, but you don't feel overwhelmingly confident about it. Tampa Bay Tom Brady of the Bucs going up against the Green Bay Packers at home in Tampa Bay. Back-to-back weeks where Tom Brady isn't even a top 24 quarterback. So back-to-back shit games for Brady, and now Brady probably won't have Julio. He's not going to have Godwin. He's not going to have Evans. He's going to be throwing it to some guys that are probably premier lacrosse players. That would be the case if he was in New England, but instead he has this other ragtag group of wide receivers. Now, Tom Brady can elevate anyone's play. That's at least what I believe based upon him butt-fucking my Dolphins and how he's played over the last couple of years. He can elevate these not-so-hot players to play good. So I think Brady will be just fine, but my confidence level here in Tampa Bay Tom Brady is just the lowest it's ever been because he doesn't have any fucking receivers, and they might just hammer the rock to Uncle Lenny Fournette, or maybe there's just a dump-off express from Tom Brady to Leonard Fournette, and that helps out Tom Brady a ton again. Quarterback 15, nothing super exciting. Aaron Rodgers also dealing with a ton of injuries around him at the wide receiver position. It seems like a decent amount of them will play, but they're not going to be at 100%. Last week up against the Bears, he was quarterback 17. Week 1 up against the Minnesota Vikings, he was dead last at quarterback number 32. Now, we all know how good Aaron Rodgers is, and the fact that Davante Adams goes and gets shipped off to Las Vegas is not why I'm worried about Aaron Rodgers. The reason why I'm worried about Aaron Rodgers right now is just the fact that he hasn't looked the greatest. He'll turn things around. He always does, right? He had a poor start to last year, turned things around, and won the fucking MVP for back-to-back years. So I'm not full panic mode on Aaron Rodgers either. This matchup up against Tampa Bay, though, just might end up being extremely low scoring. Now we move to the final page of quarterbacks before we pivot into the tight end position, headlined by famous Jameis Ida W. Winston of the New Orleans Saints going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. In week number 1, Jameis Winston looks incredibly good up against the Falcons. 269 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 22 fantasy points. Quarterback number 7 up against the Bucks. We get the old version of Jameis Winston, right? He saw the Bucks uniforms. He's like, holy shit, I remember being on the Bucks. And then he fucking throws 3 interceptions, 1 touchdown, 11 fantasy points, quarterback number 26. But the Bucks defense is incredibly difficult of a puzzle to figure out when you're Jameis Winston, who's banged up, compared to the Panthers. The Panthers defense, decent, right? I'm not going to say that they're one of the worst defenses in the NFL because that just would not be true. That would be wrong to say. But the Carolina Panthers defense is definitely much better for Jameis, at least. Like, they're a worse defense, so it's better that Jameis is playing the Panthers compared to the Bucks. I expect a pretty solid showing out of him. The injury, though, does worry me. Quarterback number 18, we got Marcus Mariota of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Seattle Seahawks. Week 1 up against the Saints, quarterback 10. Week 2 up against the Rams, quarterback number 18. The reason why you play Marcus Mariota is because of the rushing upside. 12 rushing attempts in week 1, 6 rushing attempts in week number 2 up against the Rams. I think he starts to run the ball again here up against Seattle, and this is his easiest matchup thus far. Again, week 1, the Saints defense is no cupcake matchup. Week 2 up against the Rams defense is solid. I know the Rams got absolutely torched by the Buffalo Bills, but the Buffalo Bills might just be the best team in the NFL, right? The Rams defense is legit. I am incredibly excited about what could happen for Marcus Mariota this week. Again, I'm not forcibly jamming him into my lineup, but if you need a guy that you could pick up off the waiver wire and play this week, I definitely like Mariota. And in my own Superflex league, I have Tom Brady, Jameis Winston, and Marcus Mariota, and I'm heavily considering starting Mariota over Jameis, but right now I'm going with Jameis. We move next to quarterback number 19, Trevor Lawrence, the man with the luscious hair. Quarterback 24 week 1, quarterback 12 in week number 2. Looked really good up against the Indianapolis Colts. It seems like Doug Peterson has his head on straight, right? He's got Trevor Lawrence moving in the correct direction. The Chargers defense, according to Fantasy Pros that I'm looking at right now, this is a 4-star matchup. That's where my rankings are at. I do them on Fantasy Pros and I transfer them onto this screen, and then I look at the stats on there because it's just the easiest way to do things. 4-star matchup, I don't believe that. I think that's a bunch of horse shit. I think the Chargers defense is actually really good, so I worry about his performance in this game. I think he's an okay start, but again, we are in territory where I really don't even want to be starting these guys after quarterback 18 Mariota. Now we're kind of in the range where I'd rather just have someone different, obviously, but you might not have someone different. Quarterback 20, Ryan Tannyfraud, who has looked really bad last week, looked all right week 1 against the Giants. He was quarterback 11. Last week, he was quarterback 32. He got benched for Malik Willis. Now, again, this is the battle of the basement. I think Ryan Tannehill can get it done in this game, but if Tannehill starts to look bad again, he doesn't figure things out. This week, he plays bad. Next week, he plays bad. Plays bad again week 5. If he strings together a couple of bad games, their bye week is week 6. And normally, these quarterbacks have a long kind of leash like Tannehill because, their bye week is like week 13. They'll figure it out by then. And normally they do, right? But the problem is this is week 6. So if Tannehill doesn't figure things out quickly, he is in serious danger to get benched for Malik Willis. Quarterback 21, we got Jimmy Pornstar, Jimmy Garoppolo comes into the game after Trey Lance gets hurt up against the Seahawks. 13 of 21, 154 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 17 fantasy points, quarterback number 14. Jimmy Garoppolo, while he is the sexiest quarterback in the NFL, this guy has 0 excitement factor for me in fantasy football. You know what you're getting out of Jimmy. He's going to be quarterback 15 or 14, I guess 14, right? He was quarterback 14 last week. Quarterback 14 through 24 every single fucking week like clockwork. You never expect him to carry your team. He has very limited rushing upside. He's on a good team. He's not going to make many mistakes to screw you over, but he's also not going to take you over the top, which makes him incredibly unexciting. Up against the Denver Broncos, this is a tougher matchup. I don't really like Jimmy this week, and I don't really like him any weeks because, again, he's just unexciting. Number 22, we got Justin Fields, quarterback of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Houston Texans. Fields has thrown the ball 17 times in week 1, 11 times in week 2. 28 total passing attempts through 2 weeks. Most quarterbacks throw the ball 28 times a game. Now, if you're a Bears fan right now, I think you might be in full panic mode because what this tells me is that the team does not believe in Justin Fields. Now, I understand, Nick, just throughout week 1, right? There was the torrential downpour, the monsoon game. Okay, I'll throw that game away. But in that game, he threw the ball more than he did up against the Packers. Not good. If you're in a one quarterback league, you shouldn't even have Justin Fields on your team. But Nick, he's going up against the Houston Texans this week. That's a really easy matchup. I know. But how is he going to do anything if they don't throw the fucking ball? 121 passing yards, 70 passing yards. This motherfucker's played 2 games and has 191 total passing yards. Embarrassing. Number 23, Matt Ryan. This guy, oh Lord, man. Last week, it was bad. It was incredibly bad. They should have taken him out and put fucking Sam Ellinger into the game. 16 of 30 for 195 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 5 fantasy points. Now, going into the week, you would think, look, Ryan didn't play the greatest up against the Texans. They kind of shit the bed there. But hey, they're still the Colts. They're Frank Reich. Matt Ryan will figure it out. Michael Pittman isn't there. But it is what it is. They'll figure it out. And then the guy scores 5 fantasy points. The team as a whole scores 0 fucking points. 0 points in that game. Mayday, mayday, mayday. The red light should start flashing. I'm worried about the Colts. I'm worried that Matt Ryan's ass is finished, that Frank Reich is going to get fired. Things are looking bad. Now, Michael Pittman should be back for this game on Sunday, I think, because everyone and their mother thinks the Chiefs are just going to barrel through. They are going to take a shit on the metaphorical chest of the Indianapolis Colts, that the Chiefs are actually going to not do that, and the Colts are going to fight into this game and potentially cover the spread of, I think, 6 or 5 right now. So, again, I'm worried about Matt Ryan, but everyone thinking the Chiefs are just going to eviscerate the Colts makes me slightly worried that the Colts might be able to stay in this game. Quarterback 24, again, we're just in the range where you don't want anything to do with these guys. We got Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has some rushing upside, 6 rushes in week 1, 10 rushes in week number 2. He hasn't been turning the ball over as much under Brian Daboll, but he also hasn't really done much as a whole. 188 passing yards week 1, 176 passing yards in week number 2. Nothing special. And this week he gets the Dallas defense that looked pretty solid last week. This is just not the best scenes for Daniel Jones. So, again, he's an okay starter because of the rushing upside. But, again, once you get into this range, things are incredibly bleak. We now move to the tight end position, headlined by Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Indianapolis Colts this week. But before we break on down the tight end position, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor of today's video, Underdog Fantasy. Are your best ball teams already cooked? Well, head on over to Underdog Fantasy to resurrect them with their best ball resurrection tournament, week 6 through week 17 tournament. Entry fee is only $10 with $500,000 in total prizes, $100,000 going to first place. All you got to do is draft your team. That's it. You don't have to worry about waivers, trades, or in-season management because there is no waivers, there are no trades, and there is no in-season management because Underdog automatically gives you your best score at the end of each week of the season. Underdog also features daily and best ball contests for MLB, NBA, PGA, and NHL, so you can get action all year long. All you got to do is click on the link in the video description down below or use promo code Stokastic, STOKASTIC, to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. With Underdog, so you deposit $100, they will give you an additional $100. So make sure you guys do go ahead and check that out. That's 10 free entries into the Best Ball Resurrection Tournament. I know you guys love drafting. Drafting is the most fun part, in my opinion, about fantasy football. And now you can even draft during the season. It's great. Back on into things here. Tight end number 1, like I said, Kelce up against the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Kelce because you already know why he's so fucking good, right? The upside in Kansas City is unreal week in and week out. Tight end 1 in week 1, tight end 15 in week 2. Sure, he has a down game, but even his down game isn't going to sink the ship, right? 8 half PPR points. Pretty solid out of Travis Kelce, or not solid, but pretty decent, right? He didn't screw you over. Week 1, 22 fantasy points, so I think he bounces back here up against the Colts. At number 2, we have Marky Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens going up against the New England Deflatriots. 8 fantasy points week 1, tight end 12. Week 2 up against the Dolphins, 21 fantasy points, tight end numero 1. This week he gets the Patriots, which again on paper is definitely a difficult matchup. but we do see Lamar Jackson like to force the ball to Mark Andrews as well as Rashad Master Bateman. So even in a tougher matchup, we should see Andrews see around 6 to 12 or 13 targets in this game. So I'm pretty excited about the upside that Andrews has, even in the tougher matchup. At number 3, we have Darren Waller of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Atlanta Titans in Tennessee. Like I said when I was talking about Derek Carr, the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be without Hunter Renfrow in this game, which means we could see a higher involvement of Darren Waller. Through the first 2 weeks, Darren Waller has been pretty consistent. Tight end 9 in week 1, tight end 2 in week number 2 up against the Cardinals. Again here, this matchup might not seem super high scoring on paper. This matchup also might be incredibly boring, but I still think Darren Waller gets it done as a top 5 tight end. At number 4, we have George Kittle meet Timbers, tight end of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver. My assumption right now is that George Kittle will end up suiting up on Sunday. He was cleared to play in week number 3. He is obviously one of the better tight ends in the NFL when he's healthy. Obviously, playing a guy coming back from injury might make you a little bit nervous, but Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy Guap, Jimmy Pornstar, Jimmy Garoppolo loves throwing the ball to his tight end, George Kittle. I'm sure, I've said this a bunch of times, and I think it is still pretty funny, that I'm sure Jimmy Garoppolo has a nice tattoo on his back. It says, "I love George Kittle," because he really does love throwing the rock to George Kittle. At number 5, we have Kyle Pitts. Now, Kyle Pitts, 2 weeks in a row, has ran train on your fantasy football team. 3 fantasy points week 1, 3 fantasy points week 2. At least, though, in week 1, he had 7 targets. In week 2, he only had 3 targets. Now, Arthur Smith, head coach of the team, is taking shots from everywhere. Bang, 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 bang. Everyone is saying, "Motherfucker, why are you not giving Kyle Pitts the ball?" He's like, "Oh, it's not part of the game plan, blah, 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 blah. This isn't fantasy football. This is real life. We're trying to win the game, blah, 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 blah." Shut the fuck up, man, and give the ball to Kyle Pitts. This matchup is too good to sit him down. I still believe in Kyle Pitts. At number 6, we got Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. Back-to-back solid performances out of Goddard. Tight end 13 in week 1, tight end 7 in week number 2. Again, Dallas Goedert is one of those guys where now we're in the range of, they're just all right. Every week they'll probably finish tight end 6 through 13. They have that dog inside of them where Goddard could have a huge game, but there's more competition now with A.J. Brown. So you're probably just going to have to be excited about 10 half PPR points every week. If he gets 16, you shouldn't be surprised. If he scores 7, you shouldn't be surprised. But he's relatively safe every week. That's kind of how I feel about this whole range of tight end. Number 7, Gerald Everett going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, with Justin Herbert, the pervert, a little bit banged up. Some people will panic. But I think Gerald Everett is going to be just fine. Keenan Allen could end up returning. But even if that is the case, I think Everett is still a key piece on this team. Week 1, 4 targets. Week 2, 10 targets. Tight end 4 in week 1. Tight end 11 in week number 2. Again, just one of those safer tight ends. At number 8, to close out the top 8, we have Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Los Angeles Rams. Now, Zach Ertz looks absolutely insane with blonde hair. Maybe he's always had blonde hair, but I thought he had brown hair, and to me, I think he looks weird with blonde hair, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's always looked like that, and I'm just a big fat fucking idiot. But at the end of the day here, Zach Ertz is getting fed the ball. Without DeAndre Hopkins, seems like Hollywood Brown isn't in the best standings with the team, like he isn't doing the best. I still would start Hollywood Brown, but I think Zach Ertz is starting to continue to move on and or up and up and up the rankings for this team in terms of the hierarchy of targets. James Conner's banged up, might not play on Sunday, so we might see even more volume for Zach Ertz. 11 targets last week, tight end number 5. Think it's pretty decent to be rolling out Zach Ertz. Tight end number 9. Again, we're still in the start-worthy range. Once we hit tight end, I would say around 18 is where things start to really fall off. It's pretty similar with the quarterback position. At number 9, we have Tyler Higbee of the Los Angeles Rams going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. Week number 1, we saw a large target share for Tyler Higbee, but he didn't perform. Week 2, the same large target share, but he does perform. 9 targets, 7 receptions, 71 receiving yards, 11 fantasy points, tight end number 8. At the end of the week, I think we see another pretty decent performance out of Tyler Higbee. Again, it is hard to expect anything colossal to come out of Tyler Higbee because of how much Matt Stafford loves to just feed the ball to Cooper Kupp. At number 10, we have TJ Hawkinson, tight end of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson is currently questionable with a hip injury. He was limited in practice on Friday, but I don't think we're going to see them bench him. He's gotten 7 targets in back-to-back weeks, has finished outside the top 20 in back-to-back weeks. I think we're just bound for a bounce back game out of Hawkinson here. At number 11, we have Dawson Knox one time. If you are with me, tight end of the Buffalo Bills going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami on Sunday. He is deemed questionable after not practicing on Wednesday and being limited on Thursday and Friday. I believe Dawson Knox is going to play. Dawson Knox, another one of those tight ends that's very good. They pay him all the big bucks, but for some reason, he's just not being used on the team. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 41 yards, 6 fantasy points, tight end 18. Week 1, tight end number 50. Again, I think there are greener pastures ahead for Dawson Knox. I'm not fully panicking yet. Tight end number 12, we got Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders going up against the Eagles. 5 targets, 3 receptions, 37 yards, and a tug up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit last Sunday. 11 fantasy points, tight end number 6. Logan Thomas is never going to be one of those target gobblers on a team. He's never going to get, now that they have McLaurin, Samuel, Dotson, he's never going to get 10 targets a game. But what he's going to do is get 5 to 6 targets a game, catch you 40 yards, 2-3 balls. He's going to either get you 7 fantasy points or like 15. And that's just the range we're in at tight end. Logan Thomas is pretty decent. Again, I think this is going to be a higher scoring game. So I definitely want to start Logan Thomas this week. At number 13, we have Hayden Hurst of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Jumbo Jets in MetLife. Back-to-back weeks with a solid target share for Hayden Hurst. Even with T. Higgins back, he's still getting the targets. Now, he's yet to score, so he hasn't been the greatest of tight ends, but he's getting the volume, and eventually you got to follow the volume to eventually score, especially against the Jets. So Hayden Hurst is a decent start. Number 14, we got the other tight end in this game, Tyler Conklin, another guy that's just being fed the ball. Week 1, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 16 receiving yards, a touchdown, tight end 11. Week 2 up against the Browns, 6 receptions on 9 targets. Very nice, I like. 40 yards. 7 fantasy points, tight end number 16 again. Nothing special, nothing groundbreaking, but there's worse tight ends than Conklin. 15, Irv Smith, who looked really good in week 2. Week 1 wasn't really targeted all that heavily. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 36 receiving yards, a touchdown, 12 fantasy points. Tight end number 3, we probably would be looking at Irv Smith drastically differently if he actually caught that ball on the sideline where he was wide open, should have caught the ball, dropped it. It is what it is. I think Irv Smith is decent. Again, these guys are all decent, but they don't they don't get me just so excited to put them in my lineup. Big Bob Tunyon, 2 weeks of not being super hot, but the Packers are eventually going to turn it around. They have so many injuries that Tunyon might just be the most healthy motherfucker out there and see a decent dosage of targets. Tight end 17, we've got the king of dropping the football, Evan Ingram, but he hasn't had a single drop this season. Round of applause for Mr. Eazy-E, the guy that I've been poking fun of for years for dropping the football. Now, the guy's got fucking glue on his hands. He's got stickum on his hands, or whatever that shit was called. Or stuckum. What was that called? Where you put it on your hands and you basically catch everything. That's what Mr. Evan Ingram has. 8 targets, 7 receptions, 46 yards, no touchdowns, 8 fantasy points, 14 at the tight end at the end of the week. Again, not very exciting, but he's going to get the targets. Number 17, or number 18, I should say, we move to Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. He finished as tight end 4 last week, goes 4 for 4, like he's at Wendy's, 41 receiving yards. Congratulations to Mike Gesicki, 1 touchdown, played great in that game, but there's still worries about, Mike McDaniel wants you to block. So early on in the game, when they're not just throwing the ball all around the yard, how involved is Gesicki going to be? Not very much. So if the Dolphins if Mike McDaniel just says, you know what, fuck it, Gesicki, he's too good of a receiver to be sitting on the bench. Cedric Wilson's banged up. We're just going to play Gesicki. Then okay, I'm fine starting Gesicki going forward. But until I see that, until I feel very clear on that, I would rather not play him. Now we move to tight end number 19, Albert Aquabonum of the Denver Broncos. Week 1 sees a decent target share. Week number 2 only gets 2 targets, no receptions, 0 fantasy points, a big fat goose egg. I just don't know how to read this Denver Broncos offense. I know I want to start Sutton. I know I'm okay starting Russell Wilson. Besides that, like, if Jerry Jeudy plays, I guess you want to start him and you want to start Javonte Williams, but, like, Albert O is concerning me. I am deeply concerned with Albert O. That's just kind of how I feel about it. And again, all these tight ends back here. No bueno. No bueno, as they say. Tight end number 20, we got Hunter Henry. This man has a grand total of 2 catches on the season. 35 at tight end week 1, 61 in week 2. Going up against Baltimore, I really liked Hunter Henry in the offseason. I thought, Hunter Henry, he got so many red zone targets last year. Now Now the Patriots are barely seeing the red zone. Yikes. Tight end 21, Cole Kmet, 2 total targets. Like, Cole Kmet is one of the biggest misses for me this offseason was Cole Kmet. I thought, you know what? They get rid of Matt Nagy. They go to Matt Eberflus. David Montgomery isn't the greatest, so they're going to throw the ball. They're going to see what they have in Justin Fields. They only have Darnell. Here comes the Mooney and Cole Kmet, so they're going to get force-fed the ball. Instead, they're just running the ball. Run the ball gently down the stream. It's fucking frustrating. It really is for someone who heavily invested in Cole Kmet in best ball and underdog, who heavily talked him up, who drafted him on a bunch of teams. Now I have to play Tyler fucking Conklin instead of Cole Kmet, and it sucks because Cole Kmet is so good. They just don't throw the ball, so it is what it is. Tight end 22, Jawan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints. He is the number 1 tight end on the team. They're still going to use Taysom Hill. He hasn't really been good the last 2 weeks. 7 targets, 4 receptions, 40 yards, 6 fantasy points, tight end 20. If he scores a touchdown, he'll be startable. If not, better left on your bench. Tight end 23, Dalton Schultz is banged up. Right now, the news on Dalton Schultz is that he remains sidelined on Friday. Schultz is yet to practice this week after suffering a knee injury in last week's game. He seems unlikely to play, but there's a chance he could practice today on Saturday. So I don't think you should feel very comfortable playing Dalton Schultz, and I honestly don't even think he's going to play. Tight end 24, Cameron Brate. There's just so many injuries on the team that maybe Brate steps up. But again, even if Brate does step up, is he going to see 7 targets? Probably not. 3 targets week 1, 2 targets week 2. Seems like Brady really likes the tight end if their name is Rob Gronkowski. If not, they're not even start worthy. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you hit that like button down below as well as hitting that subscribe button. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at notorious FNTSY. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.